live on YouTube, which takes just a moment, and then record to the cloud. Perfect. Right. It's always an echo from YouTube. Welcome everyone to the second seminar of C-term. Second, yes, it's so late in C-term, but just the second one. Just a quick announcement. Next week, if everything's permitting, weather, COVID, etc., we will plan to meet in person in SL 115. That should be the regular meeting room for this class. So it'll be if all goes well, our first in-person seminar in almost 3 years. So as mentioned, today's speaker would like to be a little bit interactive, so be prepared for that. I will turn things over to Daniel Sehart, who will introduce our speaker.
Yeah. So thank you everyone for joining today's seminar. It's indeed my pleasure to welcome and introduce Professor Curt Carlson. And so Professor did his bachelor's in WPI physics at Worcester Polytechnic Institute. He did his master's and PhD from Rutgers University. Moving on to his experience, he was president and CEO at SRI International from 1998 to 2014. SRI became a global model for the creation of high-value innovations, worth tens of billions of dollars, such as HDTV, Intuitive, Surgical for Robotic Surgery, and Siri on the iPhone. He is the founder and CEO at Practice of Innovations from 2015 till present, works with companies, governments, and universities to improve innovative performance services, including workshops based on Professor Carlson's proven value creation practice. He is Distinguished Executive in Residence at Worcester Polytechnic Institute from 2019 till present. He is the WPI Trustee Emeritus and WPI Hall of Fame luminary. He is also Professor of Practice at Northeastern University from 2019 till present. Teaches value creation and innovation, which has been created as an online program in Coursera. A recent article in Harvard Business Review describes his methodology. So moving on to his achievements, he served on President Obama's National Advisory Council on Innovation and Entrepreneurship.
Dan, we don't need to do all this. They can look me up later. Thank you.
Okay. I mean, I just want to highlight, I was really intrigued by, you won 2 Emmys, one for HDTV and optimized satellite broadcast. It's great. Yeah.
My team's won those. Just remember, it was I was part of it, but there was a team.
Okay. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So shall I go on further?
No, you shouldn't. No, you shouldn't.
Okay.
That's enough.
Yeah. So it's a pleasure to welcome you, and I'll just stop sharing.
Okay. Thank you.
It's all yours.
We're here to work basically. So let's okay. Okay. Can you all see that?
Yeah.
Okay. Good. Okay, and I can see everybody. That's good. So I talk about what we're doing at WPI and how we can all do a better job. The theme is projects that matter. How do we make an impact? How do we make an impact with the work that we do? And as Dan just said, I went to SRI. I had been failing for 20 years, and we grew it, the research 3.5 times, and we created a whole series of multi-billion-dollar innovations. The same people who had been failing for 20 years were now creating, one major thing after another. And the only thing that changed was how we worked together. We basically trained all 2,500 of our people how to become value creators. And that's the job of you, whatever you're going to do in life as a professional, your job is to solve problems that have meaning for others. It's not just solving problems. A WPI graduate solves problems that have meaning for others. That's the definition of impact. So let's ask a couple questions. Sarah, what do you want to learn today? Can I call on people? There you are, Sarah. Thank you. What do you want to learn?
about the
About value
about the
creation,
research,
innovation?
yeah, or about the work that you have been doing on something that could incite us to further inculcate in our projects and thinking.
Yeah, okay, good. Maybe this is going to be a little too hard to do. So let me ask it this way. Can you use your indicator, raise your hand. How many of you are value creators or want to become value creators? Can you raise your hand? We got a couple here. Good. Thanks, Bill. Jack, Sarah. Yep, good. Rick, of course. Okay, we're getting more hands. We're getting more hands. We don't have all the hands. Oh, we should have all the hands from this group. Everybody here should be a value creator by the time you graduate from WPI, because that's going to be your job. That is your job as a professional, to learn how to identify problems and solve them for others. Okay, thanks. So that's interesting. So, at WPI is a very special place because we have a great STEM education to solve the world's hard problems. We do multiple team projects to learn how to collaborate. We have a global experience to understand different cultures. And you at WPI, you can uniquely learn how to be a value creator, value creation and innovation to solve problems that matter to others. And this little red thing here is a card we've produced. If you want to see more detail, it's on our website about what that means. So here's a critical insight. The hardest thing and the most important thing is making a contribution to society. It starts with identifying an end user's actual need. And it turns out that's really hard to do. And I'll talk about that. So how good is performance today? If you go into a typical company or a university research laboratory, only about 25% of what people are working on has any value for anybody. It's not a problem with the people. It's not a problem with the opportunity. It's just they haven't learned how to master the discipline of value creation and innovation. So that leads to the question of what is innovation? Let's see. I see Deepali. Are you there? Can you give us the definition for innovation?
Yes, I'm here. So innovation is something new that you have worked on and want to introduce that can help others build up on and help it in their work.
Great. That's terrific. William, can you add to that?
Sure. I think in its most basic form, maybe just something that hasn't been done before. And in this case, maybe something that creates value.
Yep. Okay, that's good. So we could keep on this up for a bit. So there have been about 5,000 mousetrap patents. How many do you think are actually used? Not very many, right? Only about 20 actually that you can actually buy in the marketplace. So what do we call those things that people? There's a patent, right? There's a patent. They get a patent, so it's new, it's novel. Nobody's done it before. It doesn't break the law. But if people don't use it, what does that mean? It's not an innovation, it's an invention. Invention is something novel reduced to practice, but it's not yet an innovation. So there's two terms here. Value creation, this is what we're talking about. This is the skill that's required, is the process of identifying and addressing an unmet end user need with a solution that is better than any alternative while addressing the needs of all other stakeholders. So basically, it's how do you put all the pieces together to satisfy a need that a customer has. And when it gets into the marketplace, when you deliver it into the society, it needs to have a sustainability model. It needs to be available to people. They need to be able to buy it or somehow use it by support from some other means. So here's a segue that was done by a WPI student at one point, Dean Kamen, and you all know that. So that's an innovation because they're available to you out in the marketplace and society. So then here's the next question. What's the definition of end user or customer value? Shaninya, I know I'm doing a terrible job with your name. Shaninya?
Yeah, I'm here.
Yes, sir.
Oh, we got
Oh.
two. Okay,
Oh,
go
is it-
ahead. Go
Sorry,
ahead.
is it Chaitanya or
Yeah,
someone else?
you could go ahead.
Sorry, yeah. An end user, the end user will be the one who will be benefiting from the innovation, or the one with whom, with keeping him in mind, we or her, we create the innovation.
Yep, that's very good. Who'd like to add to that? Anybody like to add to that?
I just have a quick question. When you say end user, are you using the term to address all stakeholders, or are you just using it for the actual the person who's going to deploy the solution or innovation?
Yes.
The person or group?
Okay, you're making a really important point, Chris, that we're going to get to. There are usually more people you have to satisfy. So let's start with the end user, or the person who's actually going to use what you do. That's the end user. That's the person who's going to benefit. But there are other stakeholders which we'll have to come to. So thank you. So here's a definition of value, end user value. End user benefits, that's what was mentioned, but you also have to include the costs. It's not only the benefits, it's also the costs, because when you buy a piece of software, you have to find it, you have to install it, you have to get updates. There's a lot of costs that are associated, and you have to consider that as well. If it's too inconvenient, you won't use it. Here's another principle. Some people still like smartphones with keys. Most of us don't. Most of us now have moved over to touch screens. We find them more convenient. But who decides that? Do you decide that? If you're supplying that product, do you decide that? No. The customer decides that. Only the customer decides benefits and costs that are determined by who you're trying to bring your innovation to the end user. So we can make offerings, but our end users decide the value of our offerings. Here's another one. What's the definition for a value proposition? Now, this is a little harder, obviously. And here's the definition we use at WPI and around the world. You want to address an important unmet end user and societal need with a new, compelling, and defensible approach for the offering and the sustainability model, because without a sustainability model, it's going to be an invention and not an innovation. And hopefully it's 2 or 10 times better in terms of benefits per cost when compared to the competition and all other alternatives. Just 4 questions: need, approach, benefits per cost, competition. Now, if you've ever written a research paper, you'll be familiar with these 4 questions. What's the important unmet problem, the need that you're going to address? What's your working hypothesis for the solution? That's your approach. Why does it matter? That's the benefits per cost. And what's the past and current research, the competition? Now, I want to go back to this. Imagine what happens if you take one of these questions away. Suppose you don't know the need. Can you be successful? No. If you don't have an approach, obviously you have nothing to offer. That doesn't work. If you can't really do something that people really recognize as being valuable to them, benefits per cost, obviously they're not going to take advantage of it. And of course, you always have competition. You always got to show that you're better than all the other alternatives. So these are 4 fundamental questions. And I want to tell you, they're really hard to answer. So here's what we see almost always. So we've done this now with thousands of senior professionals in leading companies like Volkswagen, GE, Samsung. And here's what the presentations always look like. We call them big A's, the people's approach. They're in love with their approach. They know it's brilliant. They want you to love it. But the truth is, it's not a useful statement, because we don't still understand the need. We still haven't specified the benefits per cost. And usually we're not paying enough attention to the competition. So we want to, next time you give a presentation, Make sure you don't do this. This is the biggest failure mode we see. This is one reason why most ventures fail, most IP fails, most things fail for this one reason. So I want you to watch. Whoops, hang on. I can't. Oops. I think I'm gonna have to skip that over. It's too complicated. I'm sorry. So here's the point that Chris made. You always have more than one stakeholder you need to satisfy. You've got your funder. Somebody's going to fund the research you do or the venture you're going to form. Somebody's got to fund that. So you've got to make it valuable to them. That's one thing. But you also have to make it valuable for your end user. Indeed, you're also going to have to make it valuable to the people you hire and to others, suppliers and others. Each one of these is going to require one of those value propositions. Chris, did you want to say something?
All I was going to say in this particular case was when it comes to end users, especially if you're deploying software, you have the people that actually deploy the solution and you have the user who uses the solution. So you could be writing software kind of like contracting out for a company, and they would be both the end user and the customer, but there also is another set of end users who are using their interfaces and stuff. Yeah. So there can be multiple sets of end users.
There almost always are, and that's, of course, each one of those requires, again, a value proposition. And if you don't do the work necessary to understand that, you fail. Lazari, do you have a question?
Oh, I think I just realized that my hand was up from before.
Okay.
I didn't actually have a question. I thought this.
That's okay. Okay. Well, it turns out it's hard for reasons that Chris is mentioning. There are multiple people you have to satisfy. And it's really hard. And here are some tips to be successful. You want to be specific, quantitative, and memorable. So if you can show from data the value of your idea, or show a demo or a prototype, or tell stories, all these things help to make your case. And remarkably enough, a simple picture, I drew this picture. It's not a great picture. But oftentimes a bad picture is often better than a good description. So again, this is obviously a segue. And imagine trying to describe a segue just verbally without a picture. It's pretty complicated. It's kind of a crazy idea when it first came out. We're going to stand on this board and it's going to be upright and carry me around. I don't think so. A little picture like this often goes a long way. And we call it bring it to life. People need to be able to remember what your presentation and why it's valuable. Okay, so here's an interesting example. Hayden, who are the end users and the customers here? What's the problem we're solving?
For the patients, that's an MRI, right?
It's an MRI.
So for the patients or the pediatrics?
Yeah, who are we worried about here? Children. Yep. Okay. So what's going on with the children? Brandon, what's going on with the children?
They are scared.
They're scared. Okay. So who benefits if the children aren't crying and scared? Who benefits?
The pediatricians or doctors.
Who else?
The parents and the children.
Who else?
Everyone.
The hospital.
The hospital. Yes, all of them, right? So this is Chris's point again. Usually there are multiple people in the chain here. So if a child is screaming for an hour and because scared by this big machine, if they turn it into basically a game, a fun game where they're going on a rocket trip to Mars, and when the MRI machine comes on and all the noise, those are the rockets that are taking you to Mars. So they've turned something which is scary into something which is a fun ride for the children. And everybody benefits, from the parents to the child to the hospital. Okay. Now the next question is, when you do something, where do you want to be? So here are three overlapping diagrams. So there are places where there are customer needs. Now we could use that as an example. We have children that are crying. You have certain capabilities. There are things you can do. And there's competition. There are alternatives or competition for your offering. And the question we ask people is, where do you want to be? Well, you probably don't want to be in one because there are customers and competition, but you can't do anything. You probably don't want to be in two because, again, there are no customer needs there. So why would you bother with that? The question is, do you want to be in 3 or 4? So I want to ask, if you could raise your hand, that would be helpful. Who wants to be in 3? There are customer needs, you have the capabilities, and there's competition. Who wants to be in 3? Anybody want to be in 3? Got a couple 3s. Any more 3s? Got a couple more? Okay. More? Okay, good. Okay, so we got a bunch of 3s. Who wants to be in 4? Who wants to be in 4? So the 3s have to take your hand down for us to tell. So we're getting a bunch of 4s as well. So there's an argument for being in 3. There's obviously there's a market and customers are buying the product. The problem is now you're competing with competition. We always wanted to be in 4. We call that the white space or the opportunity space. And within that, hopefully there are people who want your product so much, they're called beachhead customers. They want it so much they'll buy it or use it, even when it's not perfect. So for example, with Musk, with the Tesla, who were his first beachhead customers? So he was obviously doing something new. He was in a white space, pioneering electric vehicles. And his first customers were rich people in Hollywood and Silicon Valley. They were paying a fortune for this car, which was still pretty sketchy. But now he's opened up and he's now working in the entire white space, selling cars. And of course, he has now developed a significant competitive advantage against all the other car companies. So that's where we like to start. So I want to demonstrate to you now the hardest problem when you're forming a new venture. It's actually figuring out what is the need that we're going to address. This is where almost everybody fails. As I said, it's like the big A problem. So imagine, let's see, Tim, are you there? I want you to be our manager of a building where your customers are complaining because the elevator is slow. And so you have the job, Tim, you have the job of solving this problem. How would you solve the problem of unhappy customers with slow elevators?
I guess I would look into adjusting the elevator speed.
Good, that's good. Can you think of another way?
Maybe you could use some sort of different music or light system that would make it appear as though it's moving faster.
Ooh, that's clever. Okay, yeah, I think you're right. You're more on the right track there. So typically when you ask in a group, you get answers like new elevators, motors, algorithms. And of course, that's kind of may or may not solve the problem. And if you build new elevators, it's going to be a very expensive thing. So we call this reframing. It's like, can we look at this problem in a different way? And what's actually going on here? Well, the people are annoyed because they're waiting. The wait is annoying to them. Okay, well, that's a need. How can you address that? You can address that by putting up mirrors so they can look at themselves while they're waiting for the elevator. It turns out people love to look at themselves, comb their hair, just what's going on, and that solves the problem. So this is called reframing. There's always an apparent solution, but it's not necessarily the best one. Often, if you look at it from a different point of view, you find a solution which solves the problem and is better for all the stakeholders. This also makes another point. If you're going to build new elevators, you're going to hire engineers and construction workers. If you're going to put up mirrors, you're going to hire a designer. So basically the direction you go is determined by making sure you address the actual need. Now, here's what we see. If you were forming a new research project at WPI or a venture, they typically go like this. People are pretty good at describing the situation in the ecosystem, elevators and buildings and stuff. What's the problem? The elevators are slow. It's affecting the customers in the building, so it's significant. Why is the reason the problem has not been solved? Well, we can make up a number of reasons here. But what's the key insight into what we ought to do to solve it? In this case, the solution was distract them, entertain them by putting up mirrors, or you could put up a TV, that kind of thing, to distract them so they're not annoyed waiting. And the solution was what we just said. So typically it goes like this. You have to kind of work through your way answering these different questions to find out what you should really do. So here's an example that we did. So here's the situation. A lot of people in the world who are physically disabled. This young girl has multiple sclerosis. There are literally hundreds of millions of people who have physical disabilities. So what's the problem? Inadequate mobility, because the tools, the crutches and wheelchairs, are not really good solutions. So why not solve? Well, people have done things like, let's add a robot to these people. That robot that's in Japan, that robot weighs 20 pounds and only lasts 2 hours. And the question I would ask you is, would you put that robot on your child, or would you put that on your 80-year-old grandmother? I doubt it. It's not really a good solution. So what's the actual problem here? The actual problem is, how do you connect a robot to the body? How do you connect it? That's a really hard problem. And one of our people said, what about a Chinese puzzle? You know, that's where you stick your finger in, it grabs, and if you push it the right way, you can pull your fingers out. So we said, what if we put a Chinese puzzle-like device on each one of your thighs, and when you move, it would grab your thigh and push down and move you forward. So we would be alternating from thigh to thigh as you walk, pushing down and moving you forward. That's what we did. And a couple of years ago, this was selected as one of the top 10 new ventures in America by solving this problem. Basically, a pair of pants you put on that can help you with your mobility. And by the way, this is a prototype. The actual product will be almost invisible to outside observers about the person wearing this special pair of pants. Okay, here's a test. When you're looking at people, when people propose new innovations to you, here's the test. I bet you've all seen a ketchup bottle upside down. I don't know what you thought when you saw them, but I was a little surprised. I went, whoa, that's strange. And of course, then I immediately realized it solved a real problem, the real problem of pounding on the end of a ketchup bottle and spilling ketchup on your plate or all over the table. And it solves that problem. It required it has a little valve on the bottom that seals when you turn the ketchup bottle upside down, and you can squeeze on it, and that solves the problem. So this is a test. When somebody's proposing an innovation to you, all significant innovations are surprising at first. Then we get used to it, we look forward, we adapt to them. And after that, we'd be surprised if we don't have a ketchup bottle that's upside down. I'm told that 80% of Heinz ketchup is now sold with upside down ketchup bottles. So it basically is solved the problem that we all have with a very simple solution. Here's one you may know about. What was the surprise here? Jason, are you with us? What's the surprise with SpaceX? What did Musk have to do to solve this problem?
Well, he created reusable rockets.
Say it again, Jason.
He created a reusable rocket.
Reusable rocket. And what problem did he solve?
Well, if you use an expendable rocket, then you lose the rocket after every launch. And so that makes it very expensive.
It makes it very expensive, yes. So that's always been a big barrier to space communication. And he can't travel to the moon if he has to burn up all his rockets all the time. So for Musk, the key insight into the need was to have reusable rockets. Now, I don't know about you, but the first time I saw one of these big rockets land on its tail, I thought that was pretty amazing and pretty surprising. It's not an easy thing to do, but that was what he did. And obviously, he's now going to create another $1 trillion business with this when he gets into the satellite communication business. Okay, here's what we do at WPI. We hope you'll take advantage of all the workshops we do. We have workshops for undergraduates and for graduate students where we meet every week or 2 weeks. And you come in with your project. We ask you to answer those 4 questions. What's the need, approach, benefits per cost, and competition? We'll have 3 to 6 teams present. We'll give you 3 to 10 minutes to present. And then you stand there and you're quiet and you listen to feedback. And we give you feedback from different points of view. What was good? These are always positive meetings. There are no negatives. What's good? Don't forget that. Ideas for improvement. What could we do better? Different ways to think about it. Eyes of the end user and eyes of the funder. And if there are other stakeholders, we can add those as well. And so what this does is this is a basic way of reframing. People are looking at what you're doing from these different points of view to help you identify the actual need and the actual solution so you can be successful. Skip that. And here's how we think about giving and taking feedback. Feedback is a gift. I've done hundreds of projects. We've never gotten them right in the beginning. Never. When I did high definition television, that was one of our Emmys. We reframed that hundreds, probably thousands of times before we finally figured out how to solve the problems associated with that. So we ask when you're giving feedback to your colleagues, be supportive and respectful, be crisp and to the point, and build upon what was presented. Don't repeat. And when you're listening, don't respond, as I said, because we want you to pay attention to the feedback and make sense out of it in the context of what you're doing. Throw away your ego. It's okay for someone else to have an idea that helps you. It's all about getting better. It's a gift. So we hope you'll come and take advantage of this. It really will accelerate your work, your PhD if you're working on that. Or if you're thinking about going to give a presentation to a company that you want to join, come and take advantage of our workshop. I guarantee it'll make a big improvement in what you do. Okay, a couple other things. We're always looking for what we call a golden nugget. It's something significant that you have that other people don't have. It can be a technology, process, capability, business model, but it's the thing that gives you a significant improvement over the competition. And you own it. I mean, you might have patented it, but basically it's something that's hard for them to get a hold of so that you have a competitive advantage and why people must invest in you or take advantage of what you've done. A barrier to entry. Another thing we ask you in these workshops is to look at your risks and to mitigate them. So there are all kinds of risks when you do something new. The technical, business, partners, colleagues, business, there's just, endless things that can go wrong. And we ask you, if you came into one of our workshops and you had a risk, we'd ask you to do what we call a minimum viable experiment. Just what's the minimum thing you can do that would basically mitigate the risk? You can't eliminate risk completely, but you can mitigate them. And we'd ask you to draw a little diagram like this one, where the risk, it goes up and the product or the offering impact. And if there's a lot of risk and it has a big impact on what you're doing, we want to mitigate that before we start doing a lot of work. So we'll create a little chart like this with you, and we'll come up with strategies for how we can mitigate the risk, because the more risk you take out, the more value you have in your proposed idea. And there are lots of ways to do it that don't cost a lot of money. You can sometimes just drawing a picture mitigates, I showed the picture of the Segway, it mitigated a lot of risk. Mock-ups, simulations, proven results, theories, trends. There are lots of ways to mitigate risk without spending a lot of money, just to prove that somebody else has done something similar. So that's not the big concern, it's something else. Okay, so getting close to the end here. So we had ideas to this as we go along with you. As you come into these sessions, if you did one of our workshops, that's maybe 4 hours. If you wanted to do that, we can do that too. We ask you for a hook, a short statement to gain interest. So, say something that like, do you know that every year the equivalent of 1,000 football fields are being cut down in the Brazilian rainforest? Something that, people go, what? Yeah, that's right. We're destroying the environment by burning down the rainforests in Brazil. That's what we're doing. Then we need your NABC. So you have a complete story. And then what do you want to do next? For example, it might be risk mitigation. I have to minimize this risk. You might want to raise money. You might want to find a partner. You might want to be introduced to somebody. But you're not giving this presentation just for the fun of it. You're giving it because you want to move forward. You want to get something done. And again, having done hundreds and hundreds of these, I would tell you it's really hard. You have to practice, practice, practice. If you're not enthusiastic, obviously nobody is going to join your team. So you got to really believe in what you're doing. And you want them so they can repeat it, because you want them to be able to tell your story to other people to help get you support. So bringing it to life is also fundamentally important. So clearly, what we're talking about today is just the beginning. So NABC is the beginning of whatever you do, whenever you're solving a problem, whenever you're writing a paper. If you can't answer those 4 questions, you're still trying to figure out what to do. And then there are these fundamental issues. We talked about some of them: action pitches, white space, beachhead, key insights. There are other things you have to do. And eventually, of course, you have to create a complete plan, whether it's an R&D proposal to some funding agency, a product, or a new venture. It starts and it moves along like this, step by step. And this is what we did at SRI, and that's why we were successful. So I'll end with this example. So when we developed Siri, that was years of research and actually hundreds of millions of dollars. And we were creating these NABC value propositions, one after the other, to answer these fundamental questions. We finally figured out we could answer them. We hired this team that I show here. Adam Shire is the technical genius from SRI, who is the key architect. The guy in the center is our CEO. We then worked with them for another year, developing the full venture pitch. And we formed the company, and 2 weeks after the product was launched, Steve Jobs called us up and said he wanted to come over. That's kind of a funny story. He called up our CEO and he said, "Hi, this is Steve Jobs." And our CEO, his name is Doug. Doug said, "No, you're not." And he hung up the phone. So 1 minute later, Steve Jobs calls back. He said, No, this really is Steve Jobs. I want to come over and meet you guys. So he personally came over. He didn't send the vice president. Steve Jobs came over. And then eventually he bought the company. It became obviously on the iPhone, added about $50 to $75 billion to the value of Apple. And SRI made a lot of money from that too, but only Steve Jobs could turn it into the product that it is today. Now, the point here is that this idea of answering these fundamental questions never stopped. It started with the research, it went on when we were forming the venture, and it continued after we formed the venture, because every project inside of Siri, when we formed it, still had to answer these questions. What are we doing that has value for the stakeholders that we have for this project? Everything you do in life, you should be able to identify these 4 questions for what you're doing, because everything you're going to do as a professional will have stakeholders that your job is to add value for them. And it doesn't matter whether you're in the finance department or HR department, your job is always to be able to create value that has meaning for others. That's the heart of WPI. So with that, let's, Adam and Dan, let's have a discussion with our gang here today.
Yeah. So,
Where's the question?
Pardon? I didn't get you.
Who has a question today?
Yeah. So, is anyone having questions? You can either raise your hands or unmute yourselves.
We're going to call on you if you don't answer a question. Ru Wang, what do you? Oops, Sarah raised her hand. Thank you, Sarah. You're a brave person.
All right, I have a question. So my question is, do you think that all companies can or are willing to do this sort of value creation that you've described?
A great question. So thank you. No, they don't. They don't seem to realize that people need these skills. Now, the good news is you don't need permission from anybody to do this. You can just do these things. That's how we started this. I didn't have permission when I started doing this at SRI. In fact, my senior vice president, I was a middle level manager. My senior manager said they was going to support us at all. And we started doing this and we started growing so fast, we basically took over the company. So you don't need permission. All you need to do is get together with your team, and if you work this way, I guarantee you'll impress your colleagues and your managers. If you can answer these 4 questions that I've started with and create action pitches, I guarantee you'll impress your colleagues. That's what we did. We took over. Chris, you have a question?
Hey, yes, I do. First, thank you for your presentation. I guess my question is, what was your biggest downfall trying to get an innovation off the ground, and what did you do to overcome it?
Well, I mentioned the biggest downfall. The biggest downfall is always identifying the actual need. That's where basically everyone struggles, and it's because they fall in love with their idea, and it's really hard for you alone to reframe your problem in a way that actually identifies it. That is the biggest and the hardest thing that we do. And by the way, in our workshops, when people come in, we have them do it. We teach an idea, and then they give a presentation, and they get the feedback. We give them another idea. They do it again. They do it again. They do it again. So with our graduate program, for example, the students come back every week or two. And we do it over and over again. And if you do that and you get feedback the way we do it, it's almost inevitable that you're going to do a profoundly better job. It is the thing that makes the difference. If you do that, if you open yourself up to that. And again, it doesn't take money to do that. You just have to say, would I like to be part of this to get that kind of feedback. What else?
Yeah, we have Christopher Collins.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry, the poll just popped up. Let me answer that really quickly.
Okay.
Okay, who else? Who else have we got here?
Okay, sorry, I just finished that. So my question kind of walks into a gray area here where, we talked about innovation requiring a couple of different key factors. But for example, if you identify a need, and you come up with a solution, you design an approach, but you realize you're completely outclassed by the competition, right? For example, I want to produce some really small plastic something or other that any company in the world could injection mold and could modify in 17 different ways to have a patent that works around my particular design. But I do see a need. I've identified this need.
Yeah.
Do you have a path to monetization for stuff like that? Or do you just scrap it because you're like, no, unless you're working at a big company that can do this cheaply, you're basically just going to get out competed off the ground?
Yeah. So obviously there are lots of things you can decide to do. We always wanted to do things that were significant enough so we didn't run into that as a major issue. If we had an invention like that, we would typically license it to a big company who could protect it and take care of it. So we wouldn't form a venture with that. We would just license that. Most inventions, innovations in the world are smaller things. but they're not necessarily candidates for forming a new company. If you're going to form a new company, you're competing with everybody in the world, and you need to have a big idea that you can defend.
Okay. And if you're just kind of a small creator or a maker and you design something like that and you're looking to license it, what resources are there, if you're not part of a university like this, that you could go and use to get into contact with the people you want to license with or reach out to? How do you make those, where are those connections for somebody that doesn't have the university as a resource?
Yeah. Well, there are venture groups. There are small investment groups that have formed all over the world where people can give you $100,000 or $200,000. So you can look them up and you can go pitch to them.
So kind of treating them like angel investors.
Yeah, they're angel investors. Yes,
would they help you like find the person? Like, would they help you find the people you want to license to, or would they directly invest in you?
Well, if they're a good group, they will. So that's part of it. Of course, they will, because they're trying to make money with you. The guy who invented the nozzle for the upside down ketchup bottle, he basically did that on his own, and then he licensed it. It was kind of a struggle in the beginning. People thought it was kind of a crazy idea, but eventually he got a big license with Heinz, and he became a multimillionaire. That was done with a license with an invention that he couldn't do by himself. He needed a partner to put that on products that could be effective.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay, what else do we have? Alex, how about, oops, did somebody else raise their hand? No, we answered those. Alex, what about you? You there, Alex? You with us?
Yep, I'm here.
Yep.
I think I don't really have any questions, but I did want to say that this presentation was very insightful in how I can go about potentially working on establishing more of the necessary things for pushing like my the value proposition of a project that I'm hopefully working on bringing to a potential startup stage in my PhD research after my master's. So
yeah, where are you right now? What stage are you at?
Currently, I know we're just in development right now. I know there was some techno-economic analysis performed earlier before I got onto the project, but
okay. Well, again, if you folks are interested in more of this, you can come just call us up, and you can come and pitch and get advice from my partner and I. We've formed hundreds of ventures. I mean, I personally am part of 20 startups, so we've been through this quite a few times and done literally hundreds of research projects. So from research to every form of innovation you can think of, and not just technological innovation, also social innovation, education, all kinds of things.
Great.
So
just a quick note, I can highly recommend the seminars. I've been to a couple of them, and they're very helpful in terms of developing proposals for research. Thank you.
Yeah, and we have fun too. I mean, they're all very positive meetings. I think Adam will agree. We have laughs and we have a good time, but we also, it's about improvement. It's about how do we learn faster? How do we give everybody these skills and share them so we can succeed and be more effective? So yeah, let's see. We got a couple more minutes for a few more. Manish, how about you? You with us, Manish?
I'm good. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
No question from my side.
Say it again.
No question from my side.
No questions?
Yeah.
Okay. Matt, how about you?
So I have, an enormous amount of questions, but to ask just one, I have absolutely no issues in my life with coming up with not just evolutionary, but with revolutionary designs and ideas and etc. The question that I have is what is the on-ramp in terms of starting the journey into entrepreneurship. So for instance, there's a lot of folks where they'll finish their bachelor's or even not even finish it, but have an excellent idea. They'll go out, they'll put a pitch together, get funding, and then start their own company.
Yes.
But if you're not willing to take that risk, perhaps you want to finish grad school or you want to begin working for a couple of years, get yourself some sort of stability in your life. And then you go on and prototype it in your garage, find an investor, and then now you begin. So it's the sort of thing where obviously to mitigate risk in your own life, like just to prevent yourself from falling on your face, having student loans and et cetera, you want to have some sort of financial security. You want to work for a couple of years, but at the same time, life's passing you by in terms of developing and patenting and moving on with these ideas. So honestly, like the Heinz ketchup bottle design, where the guy made it himself, came up with it, and then brought it to Heinz and said, hey, how about we make something with this? That's probably the most realistic avenue in my mind for starting my own business in the future. But the question becomes, how much are you typically able to invent while working an R&D job, or will you just get all that called away from you when you try and start a company, depending on because they'll just say, well, you thought about it while working here, sort of thing. So it's a matter of trying to separate what am I creating versus what am I working at versus what am I helping to do at my job.
So there's a lot there. You ought to come to our workshop, because then we can discuss this in detail. So there are lots of on-ramps to innovation and entrepreneurship. I would say, though, the fundamental thing you want to learn first is how to create value. Too many people think they can come up with an idea and jump and become an entrepreneur, and they fail. Most of them fail. I mean, just huge number of failures because they really haven't come up with something that answers those questions I've talked about. So, you're lucky at WPI, you can come and you can learn how to do that. There aren't many places you can learn that kind of input. Just to pick on one of your other points about if you're working at a big company, Steve Wozniak was working at HP, and he went to them multiple times. I don't know how many times, let's say half a dozen times, and said they should pay attention to these new crazy computer devices, and they turned him down. And eventually he just got frustrated and left. Now, California is a state that's pretty lenient about that. It's pretty hard for a company to go and sue you for that unless they have a really strong case. And of course, in the case of HP, they weren't interested anyway. So that's a really common way for people to get started from big companies, other than starting out, and saying, I mean, there are people like, Bill Gates, for example, who basically in college came up with an idea to form a company. So that's possible too. But I would tell you, understanding a bit more about value creation before whatever you do, that will be a huge advantage to you. Huge. And again, I've done this all over the world. There are very few professionals who can even answer what I've discussed today in this workshop. I've only touched the surface. Very few professionals, if you put them in a room and you ask them to answer those 4 questions for what they've been doing for years and spending millions of dollars on, most of them can't do it because they haven't learned these things. At WPI, you have the chance to learn them. Let's see, we have time for one more question.
Just pleased to report that about 2/3 of the audience members got the 4 components of the value proposition that you posed: the need, approach, benefits, and competition. So we have learned something. There is time for one more question if you like.
Okay. One more. Gang? Who's got a question they're going to say, oh, I wish I asked that guy that question? Who's going to do that? Somebody will here.
Don't see anyone.
Oh my gosh. Yao, what about you? Yeah, were you there? Maybe not.
Me?
Brandon, you're good. Go ahead, Brandon.
Sorry, I thought you were calling on me.
Well, I am now. Yep, Brandon.
Well, I've heard a few similar talks, but I understand that feedback is very important. And
Critical.
yeah,
Critical.
we used to do that at an old school of mine where we were turning an assessment and then we could revise it to meet standards.
Yep. Yeah, so that's a fundamental thing. People do succeed without doing enough of that. But I'll tell you, the people who succeed the fastest are the ones who accept and look forward to getting feedback from all the different points of view that's in a place like WPI. That's fundamental. If you want to succeed early, that's what you want to do. Okay, Adam, I think we've done everything we can today. I want to thank you folks for showing up and listening to this. I hope you'll look us up. I guess, Adam, can they do it through you and Daniel? They can find us?
Sure. Or let's see. Don't know if it's the Innovation and Entrepreneurship group with Curtis Abel or
yes, Curtis,
RSI.
That will do it. So if you look up the innovation website, you can find the right people and you can see the kind of programs we're doing. And we'd love to have you. And if you're beginning your PhD, we can help you define your value proposition for that. And if you're halfway through, we can help you do a better job, I think, and get you ready for when you give your talk at some university or company when you're all done. So I hope you'll do that.
Terrific. Well, thank you very much. And in spite of your best efforts, Rick Sisson is still here. So thank you for
hey, Rick.
Hey, always good to see you, Curt.
So Rick's a master at this. We've known each other for over 20 years, Rick, right?
Yes.
Yep.
Terrific. Great.
Actually, we met in Naples, Florida.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, for an offsite for WPI. Yep. Okay. Gang.
Well, thank you very much once again. Appreciate it.
Yep. Thanks. Ciao. Bye-bye.